Okay, so let's unpack this. Because when you ask ChatGPT a question or, generate an image on your phone, you probably picture your prompt just floating up into this.
Like this invisible, weightless thing.
Right, exactly. This pure ethereal thing we call the cloud. But the reality is, to answer you, companies are currently spending billions of dollars to forge literal heavy metal and copper and glass.
Oh, yeah. The cloud is definitely not vapor. I mean, it is rapidly becoming, honestly, the most expensive physical construction project in human history.
It's why.
It really is a complete architectural teardown of how global computation actually works. We are watching the entire tech industry rip out the foundation of the internet, basically, to replace it with something completely alien to traditional computing.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We're going to decode this massive physical shift happening right now inside the hardware of the AI industry. And we are pulling from two really fascinating sources today that paint a complete picture of this evolution.
Two very different but connected sources.
Yeah. First, we have a highly revealing custom AI investor presentation from Marvell Technology. And second, a recent industry report that details this, like massive jump by OpenAI.
Which is huge news.
Right. The software company behind ChatGPT taking this massive jump into custom chip design in a partnership with Broadcom.
And those two sources, they really pair perfectly because, well, Marvell gives us the raw blueprint of the global infrastructure, right? While the OpenAI report shows us how the biggest players are actively, manipulating that blueprint just to survive.
Exactly. So we're going to help you understand why the most powerful tech companies on Earth are suddenly ditching these off-the-shelf processors to build bespoke hardware from scratch, and what this multi-billion-dollar pivot means for the technology you interact with every single day.
Yeah, the everyday impact is going to be massive.
So to understand why tech giants are redesigning computer chips at a molecular level, we really have to look at the sheer velocity of the money being spent. The old way of building data centers has it's hit a physical and financial brick wall.
A very hard brick wall.
Yeah. Looking at this Marvell presentation, they track the capital expenditure, so the infrastructure spending, for the top 4 U.S. hyperscalers. And they projected jumping from $153 billion in 2023 to an estimated $327 billion by 2025.
I mean, just let that sink in. That represents a 46% compound annual growth rate.
For companies that are already massive.
Exactly. Companies operating at the absolute limits of global supply chains. And
Right.
if you zoom out to the broader market, total data center capital expenditure is projected to hit a staggering $1.0 to $2 trillion by 2028.
$1 trillion.
Over $1 trillion. We are staring down $1 trillion being poured almost entirely into the physical plumbing of artificial intelligence.
Let's just pause on that $1 trillion figure for a second, because pouring that kind of money into traditional hardware, it just doesn't work anymore. For decades, the industry standard has been the general-purpose CPU, right? Heavily relying on the x86 architecture.
The good old x86.
Yeah, and think of x86 like a Swiss Army knife. It's a processor designed to be pretty good at everything.
Right. It's versatile.
Exactly. It can run a spreadsheet, it can play a video game, manage a server, it has a tool for every job.
Right.
But when you are training a massive AI model, you don't need a Swiss Army knife.
No, not at all. You need a highly specialized industrial scalpel.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the mathematical calculations required for AI, specifically matrix multiplication for neural networks. They are actually incredibly repetitive.
Just doing the same thing over and over.
Exactly. You're doing the exact same math operation billions of times a second. So if you use a general purpose x86 processor for that, the chip is lugging around all this extra architectural baggage it just doesn't need.
Like what?
Well, it has instruction sets for rendering cursors or, opening text files. All of that wasted silicon space generates heat and it consumes power.
And when you're building $1 trillion worth of infrastructure, wasted power isn't just like an annoyance, right? It literally destroys the underlying economics of your business.
Oh, completely. Power is the absolute ceiling right now. A modern AI data center draws so much electricity that they are quite literally being built next to nuclear power plants.
Wait, really? Next to nuclear plants?
Yes, because you cannot afford to send a single watt of electricity to a part of a chip that isn't actively training the model. Every joule of heat generated by inefficient computing means you have to spend like another watt of power to cool it down with giant liquid chilling
Oh,
systems.
wow.
So the physics of standard compute, they just simply break at this scale.
Which perfectly explains the massive evolutionary leap that Marvell outlines in their presentation.
Yeah.
They map out this historical shift in data center architecture. And we started in the era of, like, they call it software on by 86 for everything.
The Swiss Army knife phase.
Right. And then we transitioned into what they call heterogeneous computing.
Yeah, that heterogeneous phase is essentially where we've been for the last few years. It was the realization that a CPU alone just couldn't handle AI anymore. So data centers started pairing traditional CPUs with GPUs, graphics processing units, and FPGAs.
Let's define that really quick, because an FPGA, or Field Programmable Gate Array, is a fascinating stopgap. It's essentially like blank slate hardware that a programmer can actually reconfigure after it's been manufactured.
Right, it's very flexible.
Yeah, it was this bridge to get us away from rigid CPUs.
But the problem is even FPGAs and off-the-shelf GPUs aren't efficient enough anymore. I mean, a standard commercial GPU is still built to serve a relatively broad market.
Which brings us to the third phase Marvell identifies, right?
Yeah.
The era of cloud-optimized silicon. This means designing custom machine learning chips and custom data processing units completely from scratch.
And this is where the tectonic plates are shifting.
Exactly. And this brings us to the massive bombshell in that industry report. OpenAI is building its own chip.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. They're internally calling it an XPU, and they are co-developing it with Broadcom. And the report notes this is a staggering order size, like exceeding $10 billion.
$10 billion, that's a serious commitment.
Yeah, and it's intended for mass production in 2026 by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And crucially, this chip is not for commercial sale. It is strictly to power OpenAI's internal data centers.
Right, it is a totally captive ecosystem.
I really have to push back on the logic of this move, though, because, I mean, OpenAI is fundamentally a software lab. Their DNA is algorithms, machine learning researchers. It's not supply chain logistics and silicon fabrication.
Hardware is hard, as they say.
Hardware is notoriously brutal. It takes decades to master the yields, the thermal dynamics, the packaging. Why would a software company step so wildly out of their lane?
It does seem crazy at first glance.
Isn't that like a Michelin star restaurant suddenly deciding they need to manufacture their own ovens? Are they basically setting fire to billions of dollars trying to beat NVIDIA at a game NVIDIA's been playing for 30 years?
That skepticism is entirely warranted. Because building silicon is arguably the hardest manufacturing challenge on Earth. But you really have to look at the existential threat OpenAI faces here.
Okay, tell me about that.
Right now, NVIDIA holds a near monopoly on the high-end GPUs required to train frontier AI models. That means NVIDIA dictates the price, and more importantly, they dictate the allocation.
Ah, who gets what?
Exactly. If OpenAI wants to build a model that requires, say, 300,000 chips, and NVIDIA says, well, you can only have 100,000 this year, OpenAI's entire product roadmap is crippled.
Oh man, so it's a defensive maneuver. They're trying to escape a supplier bottleneck.
Precisely.
But that still doesn't explain how a software team successfully engineers a physical microchip. I mean, that gap is huge.
Well, that is exactly why they aren't doing it alone. They partnered with Broadcom.
Right, the report mentioned that.
And Broadcom isn't just like a generic manufacturer. They are the premier masters of custom ASIC design application-specific integrated circuits. So in this partnership, OpenAI brings the highly specific software algorithms. They know exactly what mathematical bottlenecks their AI models hit.
Right, they know the math.
Exactly. And Broadcom brings the physical IP. The knowledge of how to route the microscopic wires, how to manage the memory interfaces, and, how to get the data on and off the chip efficiently.
So it's really a co-design process.
Yep.
OpenAI is basically saying, hey, we only need the chip to do this one specific equation perfectly.
Yes.
And Broadcom strips away all the other baggage, all that Swiss Army knife stuff, and builds a piece of silicon optimized down to the nanometer just for that equation.
And by doing that, OpenAI transitions from being a vulnerable software lab into a vertically integrated AI platform.
Like Apple does with their phones.
Exactly. And Google did this years ago with their TPU. Amazon has Trainium. Microsoft has Maya. The reality is, if you want to survive the next decade of AI, you have to control your computational destiny. You just cannot be beholden to a single merchant silicon vendor.
Okay, so OpenAI solves their NVIDIA dependency by building this custom XPU brain. But reading through that Marvell investor presentation, creating a genius custom chip actually triggers a completely new, vastly more expensive physical problem.
Oh, yeah, the secondary bottleneck.
Right, and this is honestly the hidden gold mine of this entire deep dive. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It's all about the networking bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Marvell heavily revised their total addressable market, their TAM forecast for data centers. They pushed it way up to $94 billion by 2028.
A massive jump.
Yeah, and within that $94 billion, the category they call accelerated custom compute has a 53% compound annual growth rate. But Marvell makes this fascinating distinction. They split that category in two.
Right, this is the crucial part.
You have the custom XPU itself, the brain OpenAI is building, and then you have what they call the custom XPU attach.
And that attach market is where the real architectural revolution is happening right now.
Marvell defines this attach as all the vital surrounding infrastructure required to make the chip actually work. We're talking network interfaces, scale-up fabrics, security modules, host management, memory poolers.
All the connective tissue.
Yeah. And here is the stat that completely reorients how you view this entire industry. While the custom XPUs are growing at an impressive 47%, the custom XPU attach market is exploding at a 90% compound annual growth rate.
90%. I mean, you do not see 90% sustained growth in hardware unless a fundamental physical limit has been broken and requires a completely new paradigm to fix.
It's like, if the custom XPU is the superstar lead singer of a band, the XPU attach is the entire road crew, the soundboard, the stadium lighting, all the stage infrastructure making the concert happen.
That's a great way to look at it.
And it turns out the infrastructure is multiplying way faster than the singers. Let's unpack the mechanism of that bottleneck, because if you have 10,000 super genius XPUs sitting in a server rack, but they are communicating over a standard slow network.
It's a disaster.
Right. It's like putting 10,000 brilliant PhDs in a massive building, but giving them only one standard dial-up phone to share their research with each other. Their individual intelligence is totally wasted because they spend all their time just waiting to transmit data.
Absolutely.
So the attached infrastructure, these scale-up fabrics, is the equivalent of ripping out the dial-up phones and connecting their brains telepathically.
I would actually take that analogy even further into the physics of the silicon itself.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, in modern AI training, the bottleneck is rarely the calculation anymore. It is the data movement.
Interesting.
Physically pushing an electrical signal, containing a piece of data across a motherboard, it actually takes orders of magnitude more power and more time than it takes to actually perform the math operation once the data finally arrives at the processor.
Wow. So the chips are so fast, they are literally starving for data. They're just sitting there idling, burning expensive electricity, waiting for the network to deliver the next batch of numbers.
Yeah. Exactly. Which means the entire game shifts from how fast can the chip think to how fast can we feed the chip.
Right.
That is what a scale-up fabric does. It is a highly specialized, massively parallel optical and copper network. It allows tens of thousands of individual chips to share data so quickly that, from the software's perspective, they act as one single continuous supercomputer.
And Marvell lists another piece of attached infrastructure that completely blew my mind. Memory poolers.
Ah.
Can you explain how those function? Because the concept of pooling memory sounds like a massive shift from how normal computers work.
It is a huge paradigm shift. So in a traditional computer, or even like a standard server, the processor has its own dedicated bank of memory physically sitting right next to it.
Like the RAM in my laptop.
Exactly. But AI workloads are incredibly spiky. One XPU might suddenly need an enormous amount of memory for just a fraction of a second, while the XPU right next to it is using almost none.
Oh, I see. So if they are isolated, that first XPU crashes or slows down even though there's unused memory just a few inches away.
Precisely. That's the exact inefficiency memory poolers solve. Using advanced interconnect standards, you essentially detach the memory from the individual chips.
Okay.
And you create a massive centralized pool of memory that any XPU in the data center can borrow from instantaneously. It dynamically allocates resources on the fly over these high-speed fabrics.
Man, that perfectly explains the most jarring statistic in Marvell's data. They note that for emerging hyperscalers, and they explicitly name companies like Stargate, Apple, Tesla, and OpenAI in this group.
The big players.
Right. The ratio of chips to infrastructure is heavily skewed. For every 3 custom XPU sockets, there are 9 custom XPU attached sockets.
3 to 9.
Yeah. The infrastructure makes up 2/3 of the physical hardware.
It really forces us to redefine what a computer actually is. I mean, in the AI era, the data center itself is the computer.
The whole building.
Yes. The individual chip is just a single neuron. The attach market, the optics, the switches, the memory poolers, that is the nervous system binding it all together. And building a nervous system requires vastly more components than building a few isolated brain cells.
That makes OpenAI's move with Broadcom look entirely different.
Yeah.
The $10 billion XPU order is literally just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, totally.
Because to actually deploy those chips in 2026, OpenAI is going to have to buy 3 times as much networking and memory infrastructure just to wire them together. They aren't just designing a chip, they're architecting the entire nervous system.
And Broadcom is uniquely positioned to help them do both.
Right, because of their patents.
Exactly. Broadcom doesn't just do custom silicon. They hold some of the most critical patents for the technology that allows chips to talk to each other extremely fast. So by partnering with Broadcom, OpenAI isn't just securing compute. They're securing the bandwidth to make that compute usable.
So mapping out this entire causal chain gives us a really clear picture of the future. The sheer volume of mathematical processing required for AI, it basically exposed the physical limitations of off-the-shelf general-purpose processors.
The Swiss Army knives broke.
Right. And to avoid wasting billions of dollars on power and inefficient cooling, the industry is transitioning to an era of cloud-optimized, bespoke silicon.
And we see that manifested in OpenAI deciding they can no longer rely on NVIDIA's general-purpose AI chips.
Pushing them to co-design their own highly specialized $10 billion XPU with Broadcom.
Exactly. But solving the computing problem immediately created a data movement problem.
Right, because a custom chip is totally useless if it's starving for data. So the real explosion in the market, growing at 90% a year, isn't the chips themselves.
No, it's the infrastructure.
It's the massive optical networks, the scale-up fabrics, and memory poolers required to wire tens of thousands of custom chips together into a single, unified supercomputer.
The physical reality of the AI industry is that connective tissue is now more important, and honestly growing faster, than the compute itself.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. Why does this matter to you, the person listening right now?
It's a valid question.
It matters because the next massive breakthrough in the AI tools you rely on, whether that's, a model that can perfectly diagnose a medical scan, or a system that finally masters autonomous driving, that breakthrough isn't going to happen just because a programmer wrote a clever new line of code.
No, the software has largely reached the physical limits of general hardware. You just can't write a smarter algorithm if the chip takes too long to fetch the data.
The next leap in artificial intelligence will happen because the physical hardware has been purpose-built, molecule by molecule, to execute that specific algorithm flawlessly. The magic of the ethereal cloud is entirely dependent on the heavy metal forged in places like TSMC's foundries.
It represents a total fusion of software intent and physical design. The algorithm dictates the silicon, and the silicon enables the algorithm.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought to ponder. We've spent decades in a tech ecosystem where the boundaries were clear, right?
Very clear.
Software companies wrote code, and hardware companies built the boxes that ran the code. But as companies like OpenAI start designing their own physical hardware layer from top to bottom, perfectly molding the silicon to their proprietary algorithms, what happens to those traditional boundaries?
They completely dissolve.
Right. If the physical wiring of a chip is designed solely to execute one specific neural network, are we entering an era where the software literally is the hardware?
It's a wild thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you type a prompt into an AI and it answers you from a custom-built, trillion-dollar nervous system of heavy metal.